Mankind knew they cannot change society, so instead, they decided to distract themselves and make a board game. In this preview, we're going to be taking a look at Guilty Gear, the board game. This is a game that plays like the video game, where you'll go head to head, fighting your opponent playing cards, hoping to get that heavenly combo off to take your opponent's life to zero and send them straight to hell. So, without further ado,
Let's rock!
The prototype copy in this video was given to Roll for Crit by Level 99 Games. No other compensation was received in the making of this video. Just like in the video game, you'll be going up against another fighter trying to take their health down to zero in order to claim victory. Now, obviously that's the best way to win, but there is a timer in this, just like in fighting games. Should your deck run out, you will shuffle your discard pile back into your deck, and if it runs out again, then you lose. So do try to defeat your opponent before then. Your turns will be going back and forth, usually taking an action, and then at the end of your turn, drawing a card. There are a wide variety of actions you can take, so the first one we're going to go over is one that is probably very obvious that you'll need, and that's walking, aka moving. There are spaces on the board here, and when you take the walk action, you can move your character forward or backward a number of spaces. For each space you want to move, you must spend a force. A force is generated by either discarding cards from your hand or from the gauge. There are also ultra cards. They will have this card symbol in the top left corner. They actually generate 2 force for you, so they are a great way for you to quickly close or increase a gap. One other note, if you want to move 1, 2, 3 here, that would cost you only 3 force. But to move over here, that costs you 2 force to jump. So in total, that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 force. So if that matters that you need to get over your opponent, keep in mind it's a bit more expensive. Now the next action you can take is exceeding. Remember the ultras, that symbol there? Well, you may notice that on your personal card there. Each character has their own card with their unique power, but you can spend the cost there by discarding that many cards from your gauge. So let's say we had 3 in there. We could discard these 3 cards in order to activate this ability and flip it over to its stronger side. Cards in the gauge will also be used for other things, such as, for example, playing those ultras I mentioned before. We'll get to that when we get to fighting, as well as when it comes to the next action, boosting. To boost a card, you will play a card in the boost section using its boost area here, the bottom half of the card, for an ability. There are 2 different kinds of boosts, one that trigger instantly and then are discarded, or ones that stay out and then are usually attached to another action. Then you may notice a little clock here with that same cost symbol that are on the exceeds and ultra cards. That allows you to cancel. Usually you take 1 action and you're done. However, with boosts with cancel symbols, they allow you to play the boost, then spend the cost, almost always 1 card from your gauge, in order to take another action. That other action could be anything. It could be playing another boost into another cancel, which allows you to then play another action, maybe then striking after you have 2 boosts set up, or moving. It is a great way to combo and really punish your opponent. Now, a lot of people may be wondering, 1, well, how do I get guards into the gauge to pull off all these strong abilities? And 2, this is a fighting game. Why haven't I talked about punching something yet? Well, let's talk about that now. And the next is striking. Now, when you strike, you'll be choosing a card from your hand and playing it face down. Then your opponent will do the same. After everyone is ready to go, you will flip over your cards and then see how the combat goes. Every card has multiple stats here. They have a range in terms of the range you're allowed to hit someone, the power, the amount of damage they deal, the speed, how quickly the attack will go for, as well as armor and guard. Now, once both cards are revealed, you're going to look at the speed. I'm actually going to do a quick swap here. I literally showed the block only to show off as it shows all 5 boxes, but you'd never initiated an attack with a block, or I don't see why you would. So let's say we started off with a slash. We are within range 1, meaning the spaces next to us, meaning the attack will hit. The speed is 5. The opponent's speed is 2, meaning our card will trigger first. Whichever card has the high speed goes first. So hypothetically, if I played a slower card or my opponent played a card with a higher speed, they would trigger first. That's important as then you get into damage. So for now, let's just go back and focus on these 2 cards. The damage ideal is the power plus, of course, any boosts I played along the way that may increase my power. So right now, I would be dealing 4 damage to my opponent. Keep in mind, there are text here, which could add some additional effects. This is where those other 2 stats I mentioned, armor and guard, come in. Armor reduces the amount of damage I would take. So if this card had an armor stat, Kai would take less than 4 damage. But for now, he only has guard. So let's take his health down 4. Now, there comes the guard. Guard doesn't stop taking damage for you, but if I deal more damage than the guard value on the card, then my opponent is stunned. If you are stunned, it means you don't get to activate your card. So if I was able to stun Kai there, then his turn would be done, his card wouldn't be activated, and that would be very good for me. However, in this case, his guard value is 6, meaning he's still going to be able to activate his card. After going through my card, then your opponents are going to trigger their card. Going through the same order, if your attack is within range, then it will hit. They will deal damage, you will reduce the damage if your card has armor, and you will still be possibly stunned, though if you're going second, that is more important for some cards that may give you a bonus if you stun your opponent. And then afterwards, any cards that triggered and successfully hit your opponent are added to your gauge. If you are stunned, or if the card doesn't hit because maybe the character's moved and they were no longer in range, it goes to your discard pile. But there are a couple other fun things you can do with striking. First, you can do an exceed attack. When playing cards, you could play 2 cards of the same card face down. When doing so, you reveal and one is discarded, but all the stats on the other card are increased by 1. Meaning you can surprise someone with an attack that maybe is a little bit faster than expected, or is just going to hit much harder. Then of course, there's those ultra attacks I mentioned about before. They would play the same way as before. The only difference is you have to make sure you can pay for those cards from cards in your gauge. Finally, at any time you don't feel comfortable either on the attack or defense to play the cards in hand but still want to defend and strike, you're actually going to do a wild swing. That'll be taking a card face down from the top of your deck, putting it face down in front of you. You don't know what's going to happen. It could be good for you. It could be really bad. It'll be random regardless. If you happen to go a wild swing into an ultra attack and don't have the gauge to pay for it, you actually discard it and go into another wild swing until you have a card you could legally play, whether it actually hits or not, or defends or not. Now, there's one other important thing to striking, and that's for every other action, after you take the actions, you're going to draw a card on the end of your turn. However, if during your turn you striked, be it the one action you took, or you did a bunch of boosting and therefore did a big attack, you're actually not going to draw a card at the end of your turn. Because of this, your hand is going to start to dwindle. And when you're down to only a few cards, it means it's probably time for you to try and refill your hand. There are 2 ways for you to do that. The first way is quite simple, and that's prepare. Preparing is drawing 1 card and adding it to your hand. Remember, after any turn that doesn't include a strike action, you will draw a card, meaning if you take the prepare action, you're going to be drawing another card after that first one at the end of your turn. The second way is through change cards. Just like with moving, you'll be spending force in order to draw more cards, meaning you could discard cards from your hand or your gauge in order to refill your hand up. And remember, those ultras count as 2, so discarding all that would have given us a nice big hand of new actions for us to take. Finally, there's one other action you can do, and that is a manual reshuffle. Remember how I said you can lose the game if you have to shuffle your deck twice? Well, instead of waiting for your entire deck to run out, you can choose to do a manual reshuffle and shuffle your discard into your deck right away. That is a way for you to maybe get your stronger cards back, but you're in essence increasing your timer because that still counts as reshuffling your deck. The rest is up to you. Move back and forth, position yourself properly, exceed, and strike like there's no tomorrow in order to take your opponent down to 0. Now, usually I want to point out quickly when it comes to these previews, I have what's to be expected in the base game for my prototype copy. Maybe they include some stretch goals. Maybe some cards will not be included. It's a prototype, but everything you'd expect in the base. Here, I only had Kai and Soul to play with. And that is actually because basically the prototype demo game I have, you can actually order yourself. It'll look just like this right on Level 99 site. It doesn't cost anything to buy. I don't know about shipping, but basically you can try out with these 2 fighters as well. So if you are new to gaming, just want to try this game out, you can do it that way, or are already heavily well-versed in the world of Guilty Gear and are angry that I'm not showing your favorite character, do not worry. They are going to probably be in the base game. I have not seen the full roster. just this prototype featured these two characters, which was pointed out as my brother while playing this with him, since he is a Guilty Gear fan and was disappointed that, and quote, was not able to Heavenly Potemkin Buster me. So when it comes to the game, I'm going to be honest, probably couldn't have picked a better studio to try and tackle Guilty Gear. That's because Level 99 already does a ton of games in the anime style and genre, but more importantly, many that are in the fighting arcade game style of games. If you look through their library, you'll see games like BattleCon. These have a huge roster of characters and were already designed to mimic the back and forth advancing, knowing what your opponent actually is supposed to do, memorizing if a character is a zoner or whether they're someone who punishes you for going close, all those kinds of things. So this is not going to be something that they're going to be, how do we bring this to the tabletop? They probably already knew and just like, yeah, we could do this really easy. So it came down to the finer points. And for that, you need someone who's a bit more knowledgeable in Guilty Gear. I will admit, I do not fall under that. I'm not very good with fighting games, so I don't tend to pick them up and play them, and I have not played Guilty Gear. My brother, on the other hand, is a Guilty Gear fan, which made him a perfect test subject, person to play this game with. And it was very obvious, and not just because he was getting excited from playing soundtrack from the game, but that he was finding moments and cards and references that made him actually feel like he was playing and be able to talk about said game. He told multiple times like, oh yeah, that's what this comboing is this and this. He told me while playing Soul how he would ruin my day going in a corner with this specific combo in the video game. Apparently there are they're cards here, but moves that if Soul corners you, he just is going to ruin your day usually, and told me how Soul tends to like to punch a lot of people. Kai was, I believe, he said, I think the term was mid-ranger or something, which made sense when I was like, oh, well, all his cards want me to be like 2 spaces away for optimal damage. So that makes sense that he wants some space in between. So I can only imagine we're going to see the exact same things when it comes to the other characters, whether they're characters that want to keep a long distance or whether they're the ones that want to punish and get in close. They're probably going to be well reflected in their characters and decks. So that in turn will also make it more rewarding for those like fighting games who really know their characters. Each deck is always going to be the same for a specific character. So if your character does really well within the ranges, once again, 2 to 3, then if you know that, you know where are your sort of deadly zones, you know how to play around that. In fact, every character has a block card, which has I think it's not the main ability, it's actually the boost ability for you to name a card and your opponent has to discard that card if it's in hand. So if you know your opponent's setting up for that really sweet combo, like you know that ultra card's in hand, you see the gauge cards there, you can be like, I'm calling you out on that. And therefore stop their turn. So it's really going to reward you for knowing how each character is supposed to play. While at the same time, you technically can always still punch back. If your hand is empty or you don't want to play any of the cards in hand, you can always wild swing, which turned out to give those hilarious moments that are often played in like video game montages where like, look, I'll just top card of this deck, let's see what happens. And lo and behold, I'm faster than you and I stunned you. What it comes down to is, once again, Level 99 is very good at capturing a fighting style gameplay. It's got everything you'd want. It rewards you for knowing your opponent and knowing how to punish them. It can do all the combinations that you want in the quick jabs and getting comboing for stronger hits. I feel that it was pretty good in terms of capturing all that. And based on playing with someone who's a Guilty Gear fan, at the very least with these two decks, did a good job of making him excited and talk about the game with me. If you're a fan of Guilty Gear fighting games, this is probably one you're going to want to keep an eye on. Now, I know some people aren't huge fans when they just directly translate usually a video game straight to the tabletop, but I think just the nature of the sort of taking turns, it does a different mindset, so to speak. I mean, enough that I tend to like these a bit more as I can actually play them. I do not have the reaction time to stop you from utterly just ruining me with whatever combination it be it fair or unbelievably cheap. So I think this still does a good job. Thematically, it seems to do a great job. So if you're interested in this, I'll have a link to the project down below. Please let me know your thoughts. And of course, if you play Guilty Gear, who do you main? I love to see if one character is more represented when it comes to tabletop gamers versus maybe some of the other popular picks. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear you, whether it be on the style of gameplay, whether it's just you want to talk about Guilty Gear, all that down below. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been a Roll for Crit preview.